Thorne knew, Vera said. He wanted the ledger not to sell it, but to use the secret of the vault to blackmail the very governments that had once hidden their history there. And now? Julian asked. Now, Vera said, looking at the architectural plans. The world needs to know the true story, not the syndicate version, the hero version. Chapter 30. The Silver Screen Premiere. 6 months later, the Leicester Square Cinema was draped in velvet and neon. The marquee read, The Phoenix Vault, a true story. This wasn't the Marcus Sterling version. It was the film Vera had helped produce, a sweeping epic about a diner in the desert that became the unlikely safe house for the world's secrets. Mel had flown in for the premiere, wearing a tuxedo that he complained was choking the life out of his burger-flipping neck. Alice was the star of the show, her voice recorded for the soundtrack, finally reaching the ears of the millions she had always dreamed of. Belle was on the red carpet, looking like a queen in a dress that glittered like the Vegas Strip. As the lights dimmed, Vera felt Julian's hand find hers in the dark. "Are you happy with the ending?" he whispered. Vera watched herself on the screen, or rather, the actress playing her standing behind the counter of a perfectly recreated Mel's diner. She saw the actress reach for the radio as the first notes of The New Girl in Town began to play. "In the 1939 film The Wizard of Oz," Vera whispered back, "Dorothy says there's no place like home, but she didn't realize that home isn't a place. It's the people who stay when the static gets loud." The movie was a triumph, but for Vera, the real premiere happened afterward, at Vera's Greasy Spoon. They crowded into the booths, the London staff, the Phoenix family, and Julian. Mel stood up, holding a glass of champagne. "I never thought I'd see the day when my grease-stained apron would be a movie prop." Mel laughed, his eyes damp. "But I'm glad it was you, Vera. I'm glad you were the one who heard the static and found the song." Chapter 31. The final trivia question. The city was quiet, draped in the silver fog that Vera had grown to love. She and Julian were walking along the embankment, the lights of the South Bank reflecting in the water like a trail of fallen stars. "I have one more question for you, Vera Louise Gorman," Julian said, stopping by a lamppost. Vera smiled, leaning against the iron railing. "Is it about Humphrey Bogart, or perhaps the color of Cary Grant's socks in North by Northwest?" Julian reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, velvet box. He didn't open it immediately. "In the 1942 film Casablanca," Julian said, his voice low and steady, "Rick says to Ilsa, 'We'll always have Paris. But I don't want to just have London, or Vegas, or Phoenix. I want to have the next 50 years of your stories.'" He opened the box. Inside was a ring set with an emerald, the exact shade of the silk dress she had worn on that fateful night at the Siesta Mirage. "Vera," he whispered, "will you write the sequel with me?" Vera looked at the ring, then at the man who had seen the real girl behind the trivia. "In the 1953 film Roman Holiday," Vera said, her voice trembling with joy, "Audrey Hepburn says that her visit to the city will be cherished as long as she lives. But I think I prefer a different line." She stepped into his arms and pulled him close. "The answer is yes, Julian. But only if we can keep the radio tuned to 94 cool." Julian laughed and kissed her. A long, cinematic kiss that felt like the perfect resolution to a lifelong mystery. Chapter 32. The New Girl's Song. The morning sun over Marylebone was soft and golden. Vera stood behind the counter of her diner, flipping the sign to open. She reached for the radio, the same battered plastic unit she had brought from the desert, and turned the dial. The static crackled for a moment, then faded into a familiar, upbeat melody. "Music's hot. Don't be a fool. Keep your dial. Set it cool. KOOL." The chimes sang as the first customer walked in. "Can I help you, darling?" Vera asked with a warm smile. I'm new in town," the girl said, sitting at the counter. "I don't suppose you know where a girl can find a good story?" Vera poured a cup of coffee and placed a plate of hash browns in front of her. "Well," Vera said, leaning over the counter, "it just so happens I know a few. But first, let's see how much you know about Humphrey Bogart." As the music filled the room and the scent of fried onions drifted out into the London fog, Vera Louise Gorman realized that she had finally built her world. It was a world where no one was ever almost happy, where every mystery had an answer, and where every new girl in town eventually found her way home. The static was gone, the song was clear, and for the first time in her life, Vera knew exactly why. Chapter 33. The Anniversary of the Song. A year had passed since the premiere of the Phoenix Vault, and the fog of Marylebone had become a familiar companion. Vera Louise Vane, she was still getting used to the name, sat in the back office of the diner, looking over a stack of anniversary cards. The diner had become an institution. People didn't just come for the hash browns, they came for the magic. There were rumors that if you sat in the fourth booth and whispered a secret, the ghost of a 1940s detective would solve your problems. Vera didn't mind the myths. She knew that every great story needed a bit of seasoning. Julian walked in, carrying a large wooden crate. "Happy anniversary, Vera," he said, setting the crate on her desk. "Julian, we said no gifts until dinner," Vera laughed, though she was already reaching for a crowbar. "This isn't exactly a gift," Julian said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "It's a delivery from Zurich. My contacts at the Swiss National Bank found a safe deposit box that hadn't been touched since 1946. It was registered to a Mrs. Morgan." Vera froze. Morgan. Turkey Morgan. She pried the lid off the crate. Inside, packed in mothballs and yellowed newspaper, was a collection of silver canisters and a single, leather-bound diary. In the 1941 film Citizen Kane, Vera whispered, "The whole mystery starts with a single word, Rosebud. I have a feeling this crate is my Rosebud." She opened the diary. The handwriting was elegant, slanted, and full of the kind of urgency that only comes from someone running for their life. The 12th of April, 1946. The bird has flown, but the shadow remains. They think the vault in Phoenix was the end of it. They don't know about the third key. They don't know about the Grand Continental. Vera looked at Julian. The Grand Continental? In Paris? The most famous hotel in the world during the war. Julian nodded. It was the hub for every spy, every diplomat, and every traitor in Europe. "If there's a third key," Vera said, her mind racing through the logic of 1,000 noir plots, "it means the Phoenix Vault was only one half of the archive. The other half, the part that tells us why they were hiding the secrets, is still out there." "Are we going to Paris then?" Julian asked, a small smile playing on his lips. Vera stood up, pulling her trench coat from the rack. In the 1954 film Sabrina, Audrey Hepburn says that Paris is always a good idea. But I think for us, it's a necessary one. Chapter 34. The Ghost of the Cutting Room Floor. Paris was a city of rain and light, a shimmering reflection of the movies Vera had watched as a lonely girl in the desert. They checked into the Grand Continental under assumed names, Vera feeling like she had stepped into a 1950s Technicolor romance. But the romance was short-lived. They were met in the lobby by a man who looked like he had been edited out of a Jacques Tati film. He was old, dressed in a sharp but frayed wool suit, and he carried a briefcase as if it were a bomb. "Madame Vanet," he said, bowing. "I am Monsieur Fontaine. I was the projectionist at the Continental's private cinema from 1939 to 1945. I saw things that were never meant for the silver screen." He led them to a small, dusty room in the hotel's basement. It was filled with old film reels and the smell of vinegar, the scent of decaying celluloid. During the occupation, Fontaine whispered, "The High Command used this room to screen private communications. But there was one reel they forgot. One reel that Benny the bird asked me to hide." He set up an old 16mm projector. The machine hummed to life, a rhythmic click-clack that reminded Vera of the ceiling fans at Mel's. A flickering image appeared on the wall. It wasn't a movie. It was a grainy, black and white recording of a meeting. 3 men sat around a table. One of them was clearly a young Elias Thorne. Another was a man Vera didn't recognize. And the third was Benny, the bird. "The archives are safe in the Phoenix Desert," Thorne said on the recording, his voice tinny and distorted. "But the ledger of names, the people who funded the resistance, and the people who betrayed them, that stays here, in the Continental, beneath the statue of the winged victory. The film ended abruptly, the white light of the projector blinding Vera for a moment. Fontaine, Vera said, her voice shaking. The winged victory? The statue in the Louvre? No, Fontaine said, pointing toward the ceiling. The replica in the hotel's ballroom. It was destroyed in the liberation, madame. Or so they thought. Fontaine reached into his briefcase and pulled out a single, rusted iron key. The statue was moved to a storage facility in the Marais, he said. My father was the caretaker there. He kept this key for 40 years. He said the girl with the song would come for it. Vera took the key. It was heavy, cold, and felt like a piece of history. In the 1946 film Notorious, Vera said, Cary Grant and Ingrid Bergman have to find a key to a wine cellar to uncover a conspiracy. I think we just found ours.